really haven't read too much of the church father stuff. I just started getting into it, but if that's the Trinity, what they're describing, it's not what people of today are saying. They definitely show the Father here and Jesus as a lesser role, subordinate to the Father.
Yeah. Yeah. The church fathers are a mixed bag, and there are different. Well, first of all, even the term church father is problematic because what we mean by a church father is somebody whose writings were preserved. And I think that's a little problematic historically already, because the victors write the history, or in this case, the victors preserve the history. Because if you don't have a community that's going to copy out your book every couple hundred years in the ancient world, guess what? The paper rots. Unless it's in Egypt where it never rains. But like anywhere else, pretty much the paper is going to rot and that book is going to be lost. So what survives is the kind of books and literature that is the most agreeable to later Catholic Christianity, who stewarded these documents in the Middle Ages, and with a couple of exceptions. So, for example, all the writings of Sibelius and his belief that the Father and the Son were the same person, so-called modalism today. We don't have anything that survived. Anything of Arius. The only thing that survives is excerpts from Athanasius, where he's trying to argue against Arius, right? So that's the sort of stuff we get with him. And then a lot of these other church fathers and mothers, like the dynamic monarchians, we read all about them in the heresy reports, but we don't have any of their actual books. But even with all that, you're right. They're super subordinationists in the 2nd and 3rd centuries. Like, they're not good Trinitarians. What they say is that the Father is superior to the Son. And really, a Trinitarian is not supposed to say that. They're supposed to be co-equal and co-eternal and co-essential. And, this whole co-essential idea is something that develops over time through Middle and then Neoplatonism, where you have this idea that there are different types of matter. And so like our physical bodies are real fleshy, we're dense, and we're in this lower realm. And then as you go up higher, you get to like the moon and the sun, and then finally to the stars. And the higher you go, the more or the finer the matter is. And then so spiritual matter, or matter that is of a higher unchanging quality, is divine matter. And this is all just like obvious to ancient people, which of course is not actually the way it is, for the record. But Neoplatonism really kind of like encouraged people to think of the world as having these different levels. Some of that is based on Plato's Timaeus.
Yeah, Plato.
And as a result of that, they're like, well, at the very top, you have God, and God is actually made of a substance, a divine stuff, and he gives some of that essence. He generates from that essence his Son, but like, it's not what we would call the Trinity today. It's more like, all right, I have a certain amount of matter, and I'm going to now give some or produce more. And so it's still a separate being, but made of the same stuff. That's not the Trinity either. And that's like Tertullian. People like to point to him because he uses the T word. But his Trinity is totally different than modern.
I agree. Yeah. Looking at it, it seems like they're almost all Arians. Like, they're not the Trinity of today, but at all.
No, they're not. In thinking about this, like 2nd and 3rd centuries in particular, I think I see three main streams. There were a number of Christians, maybe 4 streams. There were a number of Christians who were Gnostics, basically, and they believed in a docetic Christ. So that's the idea that Christ is like a hologram. If you walked with him on the seashore, he wouldn't leave any footprints.
Right. He wasn't like a real person, like some type of spiritual being.
Right. And that made sense on Platonism, because their view of the world was that matter belongs to this lower realm. So like, matter is inherently questionable or even evil in the Gnostic view. So they had a subordinate, Jesus, right? But he wasn't physical. And then people like me, the dynamic monarchians, did also believe in a subordinate Jesus, but we believe that he was physical. And then you have the people who believed that Jesus pre-existed and became physical. He was spiritual, then he became physical, and that's what later gets called Arianism. And then you have the Sabellian type, which believe that Jesus just is like an avatar of the Father. He's sort of like, well, I don't have to tell you about it. You know what I'm talking about.
Right.
Maybe two places in once type of a theory but it's really still just God, the person of God. So these are all the different views that are around. The Trinitarian view just isn't around. It doesn't exist. Nobody talks about it. Nobody says they're equal to each other or they're eternal. And when this is something too, in the year 318, when Alexander, the Bishop of Alexandria, started to teach that the Son is eternal, that's what caused the controversy. It wasn't Arius who just like freaked out and did something crazy. Arius was an old man. He wasn't some radical. Arius started teaching that Jesus was eternal, or Alexander started teaching Jesus was eternal. And so Arius was like, hey, this is not the teaching we've received. This is not conservative Christianity, bud. You're innovating. And of course, he got thrown out of the church for challenging this new teaching.